So, you want to learn about the Necromancer. You want to learn where the holes are, what things need to be improved about the class, what things might be broken about the class now. Well, get ready for an advanced lesson in necromancy. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka Thraben, you here for another Pathfinder Second Edition video, and today I'm going to be doing a very detailed breakdown of the Necromancer. We're going to talk about class mechanics and focus spells and everything there is to talk about the Necromancer. And this is, to use a teacher metaphor here, this is the red pen day. This is where I bust out the red pen and I say, this is what I think is wrong with the Necromancer. These are numbers that I think are off. These are features that I think need to be changed. But I am doing so with love here. I adore the Necromancer class. I have been obsessing over this ever since the playtest dropped. I have switched my primary character in my main campaign that I play to the Necromancer. I am in love with the class fantasy that this class offers. So, I am going to focus on negative things today. I am going to focus on things that I think are off or problematic or unbalanced. However, I have a great deal of respect for the people who made this class. I think it is incredibly well designed, especially since we are currently only at the draft, the playtest stage, and I am very much looking forward to the final product. This class fills a special place in my heart. I grew up playing Diablo 2, and the Pathfinder Second Edition Necromancer has serious Diablo 2 Necromancer vibes, and I adore it. So, with that being said, understanding that I love this class, I am now going to pick it apart and shred it to pieces. Cool. All right. Now, I am going to operate under one assumption today. I am going to operate under the assumption that more is coming. So I am not going to do basic things like there aren't enough feat choices at this level, or there aren't enough things associated with the subtracks. As we see classes progress from playtest to actual release, we are pretty much always seeing an increased number of feats and features, and this is kind of the starting point for testing. So I'm not going to say I don't think there is enough of this thing in most cases. So, with that being said, let's dive into it. All right, so my first major point here is that I believe the class is not balanced correctly in terms of the range that is physically written on many of the abilities and spells that the class has to offer. And I'm going to start by talking about Create Thrall here. So Create Thrall has a range of 30 feet, and this is going to be your basic Necromancer action that you are probably going to take the vast majority of turns that you are playing a Necromancer. Because this is not only allowing you to make one Thrall and later up to 4 Thralls, but it is also going to allow you to make an attack as well. So this is kind of baked into your class as probably the most important thing that your class is doing, since it sets up for most of your focus spells, reactions, and so on and so forth. But it feels very strange to me, because the entire class is built around the Create Thrall cantrip. That is your primary way of making thralls that you need for all of your abilities, but then many of the other features aren't balanced around this range of 30 feet. The worst offender for this is probably Bone Spear, which has a range of 10 feet. Now, if you are not super familiar with Pathfinder, 30 feet is pretty standard for a close range, non-touch spell. 60 feet, that's cozy, that's comfortable. And if you have something beyond 60 feet, like, you're a sniper, like that feels good. it feels incredibly strange to me that you cannot create Thrall, skip the attack action on create Thrall, and then cast Bone Spear, unless that enemy is right up in front of your face. So if the conceptual idea is, I am ripping the spine out of this Thrall and throwing it at an opponent, it seems wild to me that I cannot do that within this 30-foot bubble around me where I am allowed to create Thrall. Admittedly, Bone Spear is a powerful focus spell. It is a D8 base damage that scales by 2d8 and has the potential to hit multiple creatures, because it can make a spell attack roll against the AC of each creature in a 15-foot line. So you can, in theory, hit 3 things with this. Now, it is my guess, and I am not a game designer. I am a player. I am a humble player. But it is my guess that this was balanced as effectively a 25-foot range. But I think in practice, this makes Bone Spear actually very hard to use unless you are playing in tight room, cramped quarter, narrow hallway sort of situations. And so I think if you want to be a Bone Spear user, it becomes borderline mandatory for you to take Reach of the Dead to effectively use Bone Spear. What this means in practice is that if you are at a low level, you might need to create a Thrall, create a second Thrall, use one of those Thralls to expand your range via Reach of the Dead, and then use the second Thrall to actually Bone Spear. So that might be 2 castings of Create Thrall, plus 2 actions from the Bone Spear itself, and possibly also skipping out on a free attack from Create Thrall while doing so that your Bone Spear doesn't happen with map. And this, to me, feels like they played too conservatively with the range of Bone Spear here. And I really don't think they should have done that, because one of the subtracks is built around Bone Spear. So the Bone Shaper, which I absolutely love, I love the flavor here, gets Bone Spear as its free class feat. And it feels really bad to me to get your free class feat and then have an immediate level 2 sort of like action tax, feat tax, let's call it that, feat tax, so that you actually don't have agency in what second level feat you are getting if you are going to be playing a Bone Shaper, which I think most people who are going to play a Necromancer are going to gravitate towards Bone Shaper. I think Bone Spear is a very, very strong and very, very attractive focus spell, and one of the defining focus spells for the class, in my opinion. So this is the first thing that feels off to me about the range. The next thing is Inevitable Return. So when an enemy dies within 60 feet of you, you can raise a Thrall in the triggering corpse space. Cool. That is an awesome class feature. Now explain to me why I cannot create a Thrall 60 feet away if I can do it with this reaction. Like, I get that there is supposed to be this, bonus burst of necrotic energy as something dies and you are taking advantage of that. But it feels incredibly strange to me that we are limiting Create Thrall's range to 30 feet. And this is not also limited to 30 feet. So it feels like we're boomeranging here, like too short, too long, not consistent. And I feel like this creates a lot of mental overhead of like, okay, what is the range of this thing that my Necromancer can do? Because you are playing with things that have like 10, 30, 60, like all sorts of different range increments. It feels very inconsistent to me. And if you're like, oh no, that's not that bad, well then, like, Consume Thrall is then 15 feet specifically. And some other Necromancer abilities are Thralls that are specifically adjacent to you. So you get adjacent 10, 15, 30, 60. The range increments for this class are just all over the place. And I wonder if simplifying this and just kind of reducing the number of different range increments that you have here ends up smoothing out the class a whole lot. Like, it is wild to me that when you cast Create Thrall, you plop down a Thrall or two within 30 feet of you. Next turn, you might not be able to cash in that Thrall or a focus point. You might not be able to use that Thrall for an ability, even though you spent actions on a previous turn setting things up. Now, the wise player who foresees everything, with perfect planning, you can maybe do multi-turn sequences that get you to exactly where you want to be. But I think the average player is often going to find themselves frustrated and go, oh, wait, I actually can't use this ability. I'm not close enough to this thing. And I think necromancers might find themselves very, very frustrated when they are fighting on a larger battlefield rather than in tight quarters, because many of the range increments on these things are tiny. If you are trying to stay a decent amount of distance away from the enemy so they don't, kill you because you're a spellcaster, then you might not actually be in range to do things like your bone spear. If you'll allow me my tinfoil hat conspiracy theory for a moment, I wonder if some of these class features and focus spells and abilities that I have just talked about were balanced around the fact that there was an assumption that many people are going to be playing a melee necromancer or like a Gish necromancer. And this resulted in some of these abilities ending up with kind of funky ranges. I'm going to go into the melee necromancer more a little bit later. I think it deserves its own full section for reasons that will become very, very clear. And overall, I really just recommend a good hard look at the range of abilities and spells for this class. And I think Conglomerate of Limbs is my favorite example other than Bone Spear of this. Conglomerate of Limbs is an awesome spell. I love this. You make a huge, yes, huge Thrall. Not large, huge. One size larger than large. That has 40 hit points. Whenever an enemy begins its turn adjacent to this, they have to succeed at a Fortitude saving throw or be grabbed by the Thrall for 1 round or until it escapes. And then on future turns, you can sustain it to have the Thrall stride up to 15 feet, using its many limbs to drag itself across the ground. So, you are telling me that my huge Thrall that I have summoned using a focus spell can only stride 15 feet. My huge creature can only stride 15 feet. I can only sustain this once per round. If a creature moves 30 feet per turn to reposition itself to, attack the party, you can never catch up to a creature that is moving away from Conglomerate of Limbs. You physically cannot do it. So if your creature does not successfully grab the enemy on that first turn and it just runs away, like, your focus spell is fucking over. This feels bad to me. I think this is a powerful focus spell. I think this spell is really cool. But I think the fact that this focus spell has an HP pool should be its balancing factor. If something wants to get rid of it, they can kill it. And while this is a good amount of HP, this is a very killable amount of HP. A solid attack or two probably ends up taking this down, especially considering that Thralls always automatically get hit. So I don't think you necessarily should also just be able to very, very easily outrun this. Even if you don't have a 30-foot move speed, even if you have a 25-foot move speed, you just get away from this in a way that is not really... You can't play around it. And that feels pretty bad to me. I would consider letting this go just a little bit further. Let it catch up to the things. Let it get those big grabby hands on in there. And I think that's all I have to say about range. Okay. The next thing that I want to talk about is the overabundance of focus spells. Now, let's start out with kind of conceptual design stuff. The Necromancer very, very clearly is designed to be a focus spell class. If memory serves, I believe we have 14 different focus spells, and that's not counting the 15th focus cantrip, the Grave cantrip, Create Thrall. Now, that's just in the playtest version, and there will probably be more later on. I think that the focus spell design is awesome design space being explored with the Necromancer. I think the focus spells here are unique. They're not just like, haha, big damage goes brr. It's much more battlefield control and positioning, status effects, whether it's frightened or grabbed or greater difficult terrain. The Necromancer focus spells are offering a lot of control in one way or another to the battlefield. And it is playing uniquely as a caster, which I think is a sign of good design. It's not just like, oh, okay, I'm an occult caster, and here's the little treat or two I get. No, it is playing as a unique class that is going to be very, very different from another occult caster, like, say, a bard. Now, here's my complaint. I think some of these things that are focus spells should not be focus spells, but should be abilities or class features. And I think the Oracle is a good comparison here. The Oracle got curse-bound features that were actions that kind of occupied a different pool other than just focus points. And I wonder if more of the Necromancer's abilities should not be expending focus points and instead just should be actions that they are capable of doing for some other reason. Now, the Necromancer is designed to effectively be a 4 focus point class because they can destroy a Thrall, consume a Thrall to regain a focus point once per combat. And while that's fine and good, when everything is a focus spell, you can't actually end up using all of them that effectively. And here's where I'm going to say something a little bit crazy. In terms of power budget, the Necromancer does not have the same number of spell slots as other classes do. It has a reduced number of spell slots compared to the baseline of 3 per level. It has 2 per level. And that is to account for these extra focus spells and Necromancer abilities that the class has. I might even suggest lowering the number of spell slots that the class has further and doing something like only giving them top 2 levels worth of spell slots or something like that, and allowing them to have more actions that are repeatable and not tied to focus spells. I think what is interesting about the Necromancer class is all of these cool abilities that they can do with the Thralls. Why not turn more of those things into class features and drift away from the spellcasting just a little bit more? It's not like you're getting the best utility out of your lower level spell slots anyway. A lot of times as you get to higher levels, your lower level spell slots become things like utility spells or reaction spells that you can just spam and not really care about. Think about your things like Lose the Path, Schadenfreude, that sort of stuff. Or maybe you're taking utility spells like Object Reading or Ant Hall or whatever. When you only have 2 per level, you're not going to be like necessarily spamming those things like reactions as much, and you are not going to be able to carry around a large degree of utility in those 2 slots per level anyway. Maybe take them away and lean more into these really cool things that the Necromancer class is designed to do. Because when I think what's cool about the Necromancer, literally nowhere in my thought process am I thinking about the occult spells at all. And in my experience playing the Necromancer in the combats that I have done so far, and full disclosure, I am playing a Necromancer in my primary campaign. We are currently at level 8, so I'm working with spell slots up to 4th level. I might cast an upper level spell or 2 for severe or extreme combat. But otherwise, most of my action economy is taken up by moving, casting thralls, um, expending thralls for reactions, activating things like wands or staves, sure striking bone spear to make sure that it hits. And I don't really know how many spell slots you actually need for the average adventuring day, especially since you get a very large number of cantrips. Like you get like 5 cantrips as a base. That's really good. That's a lot. And then if you get some more from equipment or maybe a free archetype, like you are carrying around a lot of utility between your 3/4 focus points that you have and a large number of cantrips. I I don't know that a necromancer would miss lower level spell slots. All right, now let's talk about the melee necromancer. I'm going to use a technical term here, Gish, Gish, Gish. So a lot of times people will use the term Gish to refer to a spellcaster that can also get in there with melee combat. And I think one of the things the Necromancer design space is clearly trying to do is work with this class fantasy of the Necromancer who could get in there and attack with some big scary scythe, reap souls, while also being this class that can do spellcastery things. And it is my belief that the melee Necromancer, as current design space and feats allows, does not have the support to be an effective character. Now, I think you can build a melee Necromancer that contributes to the party and does well enough, but in terms of optimization, if you ask yourself questions, why am I doing this as a Necromancer instead of doing this as another class? I don't know that you are going to have a compelling answer to that question. The melee Necromancer feels to me very much like the melee Animist. The Animist has a couple of apparitions that kind of push you in the direction of getting in there in melee combat. But to me, it always felt like they were jumping through hoops to accomplish things that other classes could already do much more easily and much more effectively. And there are some asterisks for why that is. That has to deal with the raw flexibility of the Animist. I'm not going to go into that here. But I think the overall result is that the Necromancer is lacking in the melee department. And I think you end up jumping through a lot of hoops to be perfectly average at a thing. And when I think of Gishes in Pathfinder 2E, I think of the War Priest Cleric. The War Priest Cleric is really good. It's one of my primary Pathfinder Society characters. You can get in there, you can bonk with a greatsword, you can be sword and board, you can shield block, you have a ton of heals or harms. I think there's a lot of ways to build War Priests. You can be grapplers, you can be cast down characters, you can be healers. And it feels like that Gish has great flexibility to me. And I thumbs up the War Priest Cleric very hard. And I just can't do that the same way with this melee Necromancer. The melee Necromancer is going to have fewer spell slots than a Cleric. 3 versus 2, just straight up difference. The Cleric is going to get those, I think it's 4, it might be level dependent. There were some slight changes with the remaster for how it worked. It used to be charisma based, but moving past that, I think it's like 4 heal or harm spells that are always max level. So this Cleric is rocking a bunch of heals or harms, potentially can be grappling very well, potentially can be using cast down borderline for free when you are hitting on strikes. And I think this outperforms the things that the melee Necromancer has to offer. A melee Necromancer has body shield, for example, to work with, giving you a +2 to AC and resistance to all damage. Sure, that can put you online kind of with the shield block stuff that the Cleric has to offer. And I think that Muscle Barrier is quite good. I'm going to talk about this one in detail a little bit later. But I think ultimately a War Priest Cleric's top level heal slots are going to outperform the temporary HP of Muscle Barrier if you are just trying to one-for-one comparison, what is this melee character versus that melee character like? I'm going to talk about Muscle Barrier more later because I think it is deserving of its own little section. And now I want to talk about Create Thrall specifically within the context of this melee Necromancer. So, Create Thrall is balanced in a way where it is expected that for many of these, you are going to be taking an attack roll as a part of casting Create Thrall. This strike counts towards your multiple attack penalty. So if you attack first, and then you do this Thrall attack, that Thrall attack is at low accuracy. If you use this first, and then you attack, because say you need to set it up for some ability or something like that, then your primary attack that you are building your character around going bonk is always at map. And that doesn't feel good. So there's this real tension between Create Thrall getting its appropriate amount of value and you doing a basic strike. And this feels to me like very much conflicting design space. Also, in terms of Create Thrall, when you get Expert Necromancy at, I believe, level 7, you start to get 2 Thralls, and then you can do something really cool. So, you've got your enemy, right? Create a Thrall on one side, create a Thrall on the other side, as long as both are within 30 feet. You have created flanking for yourself. Cool, it's like you have a +2 accuracy boost because your enemy's AC goes down by 2. Well, that's an awesome thing that you can do. Cool. Now let's think about throwing you in the equation. You are on one side. Now you can create a Thrall on the other side to give yourself flanking. Then are you just going to like not use your attack that you would get with Create Thrall? So you're just going to like skip out on that and then you're going to make your attack. And then you're making your second Thrall somewhere else, maybe next to you for your reaction. It feels to me like there's this real tension between wanting to create flanking and wanting to put a Thrall next to you for your reaction because it has to be adjacent to you. It feels like the spatial dynamics here are just off for a melee Necromancer. And we haven't even talked anything about, like, well, now are you putting your stats into strength instead of dexterity? And, like, becoming this, multi-attribute dependent character that wants strength for accuracy and damage, but then needs int for your spell save. And I don't know how I feel about that on the Necromancer specifically. Now, can you fix this all with a feat? Yes, absolutely. A 9th level focus spell, which I believe means you get that at level 18. You can bind Heroic Spirit. You get a +3 status bonus to attack rolls and saving throws. Hot damn. And whenever you hit a creature with a strike, create a Thrall in a space adjacent to your target that lasts for 1 minute. Well, this is fucking awesome! What an amazing feat! How many Necromancers are making it to level 18? How many? How many melee Necromancers are still alive at level 18? I think that's one of my biggest problems with this entire melee subtrack, this Gish subtrack. And it's not even a subtrack, because it's not really baked into one of the 3 subtracks. Like, this focus spell could instead be a first level focus spell that scales maybe many times throughout the levels, and you might be able to build a real Gish Necromancer around this. Because this is the action compression you need. Now you're not necessarily using actions to create Thralls, you just do it when you hit. And then you can actually support your reaction well. So when we go and we look at the Grim Fascinations, that is the subtracks, you have the Bone Spear one. That's kind of your, I would like to hit hard with my Necromancer one. And you have a way to protect your Thralls built into that. That makes sense to me. You have the Flesh Magician one that makes you kind of tougher, and there's currently a sort of difficult terrain movement control sort of thing here going on, which I think is quite flavorful. I have some more to say about the Flesh Magician in a separate section later. And then you have the Spirit Monger that is more about the spirit, void damage stuff that is baked into another one of the Necromancer class features, the Mastery of Life and Death. Whenever you cast a spell or use an ability that would deal void or vitality damage, use the weaker of the target's resistance or immunity to void or vitality. So I think Mastery of Life and Death matters the most to a Spirit Monger. But I wonder if Paizo wants to keep this Gish Necromancer, this melee Necromancer idea alive, I wonder if that happens in the form of a fourth Grim Fascination. And in terms of one of my assumptions for this video, one of my assumptions at the beginning of this video is that more is coming later. I expect that we might see more follow-up feats or more class features that drop for each one of these Grim Fascinations to make them feel more unique from each other. And I think if you want to make the melee Necromancer viable, it becoming a Grim Fascination is very important. And a huge reason for that being important is not all this stuff. It's not the core class features. It's actually your feat selection. So if you want to be a viable melee Necromancer, there are so many required feats in order for that to happen that I don't necessarily think you get to dip very much into the cool stuff that the Necromancer has to offer. So your melee Necromancer is probably always taking Reaper's Weapon Familiarity. They are probably always taking Body Shield. Later on, you might use another feat to take Draining Strike. Osteo Armaments is probably required. Find Heroic Spirit, 100% required for that build. And the result, I think, is that the melee Necromancer might actually struggle to get up to 3 focus points and might struggle to have an effective build at many levels because you are not taking advantage of a lot of the cool and strong things that the Necromancer otherwise has to offer. So while I think the Necromancer is pretty much a finished class in terms of overall quality, and I say this in comparison to something like the Guardian, where I did 2 or 3 fights with the Guardian, and I went, this is not ready. This is so lacking compared to something like the Champion, that my player who was playing the Guardian just respec'd into a Champion and just said, like, no, I need to revisit this later once it's more complete. I think the Necromancer is pretty done, but I think this Gish Necromancer, it needs some love still. The next thing I'm going to do is a little weird. It's a little meta. I'm going to give feedback on other people's feedback. So one of the most common complaints that I'm seeing when I'm looking on places like Reddit or the Paizo forums is that people are complaining that they cannot move their Thralls. And I do not believe that this is in any capacity a problem or something that needs to be fixed. I think in the vast majority of cases, in terms of things like action economy, it is likely to be far more efficient to just make new Thralls rather than move existing Thralls around the battlefield. Especially as Create Thrall scales up and can make up to 4 Thralls at a time. Why are you spending actions moving Thralls if you can just make more of them? And when you make more of them, you can also make that melee strike, right? So I think it does not make sense to complain about not being able to move Thralls, because being able to move Thralls seems like a trap to me in terms of action economy and mechanics, unless there is some other really cool rider attached to that movement. So let's say, for example, that there is a Command Thrall spell that just says, you know, a Thrall within 30 feet of you strides up to 30 feet. That would compare so negatively to Create Thrall, which my Necromancer is currently level 8. So I could just make 2 new Thralls within 30 feet of me and also make an attack, potentially with flanking. How busted do you have to make a command Thrall movement action in order for you to actually want to use that? I don't understand conceptually what that would look like. And so I do not understand why people are complaining that they cannot move their Thralls. From a game design and from the player's seat, I do not understand wanting to move the Thralls. There are occasionally some complaints about map clutter in terms of the Thralls just kind of clogging up maps. I think there are enough cones, reflex saves, auras that deal damage, enemies that have multi-attack that can just go ham on everything around them. Considering that Thralls have 1 hit point and are always just automatically hit and automatically fail saving throws, I don't think the map clutter issue is all that bad if you are playing smart. More on that in a second. And next up, in terms of the Necromancer's design, at what level would you be comfortable using a class feat to take something that would allow you to move the Thralls? And I really and truly don't mean this as a rhetorical question. I want you to really think about that. Like, if you are advocating for a Thrall movement feat, when would you take that? I do not think you are taking that at level 2. Because I think most Necromancers are going to want Reach of the Dead at level 2. I think that is an incredibly powerful feat. It has the ability to do some absolutely batshit wild stuff with touch range spells, and is borderline necessary to make Bone Spear work. Are you going to take that at level 4, where you are either missing out on something like a vital reaction for your build, another focus spell, or if you didn't get Bone Spear or Necrotic Bomb or Muscle Barrier, again, Muscle Barrier is going to get its own section in a minute, already, you are missing out on that at level 4. At level 6, you miss out on your class's best reaction, or alternatively, some self-healing power, or a reasonable focus spell. At level 8, you're competing with a really neat crowd control focus spell. If you're a melee necromancer, you have a required feat at that level. And I think you get the idea here. There is simply not room, in my opinion, with just the feats that are currently available to us. I don't think there is room for you to take any sort of command Thrall action or spell or class feat or whatever. I don't think it makes sense. So I think this is one of those times where people are complaining without actually thinking about the implications of what they are asking for. So I don't think the feedback that people are giving about wanting to move Thralls is necessarily good feedback. That's what I'm trying to get out of here. Now, if you are playing in very cramped quarters, I think you do need to play smart if you are playing the Necromancer. I don't think that you can just spam create Thrall like willy-nilly without there being consequences of it. I think if you are playing in very tight quarters, the Necromancer has the capability of doing some very busted things, you know? Oh, you have exactly a huge sized hallway? I have a focus spell that takes up that entire thing. Like, you need to get through that before you get to us. Or, oh, I am going to create this, zombie horde coming out of the ground, and now everybody's going to take damage, and we're going to, keep shoving you back into that area. I think a Necromancer has a lot of really good ways to play well in tight quarters. But if you create your thralls in a way that is going to be a hindrance to your party, like, that's on you. You might need to use a little bit of your time on your turn to say, hey, what are you all doing? If I place a thrall here, is that a problem? And I don't think having, basic strategic conversations with the other party members at the table is a bad thing before anyone's like, oh, that's metagaming, you can't do that. No, I think it is good to do a little bit of basic communication. Now, if your turn is taking, 5 minutes, maybe there's a problem there, and you do need to speed it up a little bit. but 1 or 2 quick questions probably not going to slow down the table significantly. And one last thing in terms of wording here, and this is maybe going to be more important for higher level necromancers. Create Thrall is up to. If you are in very tight quarters, you don't have to make 4 Thralls if they are going to get in your way. You can choose to make fewer. And while it will often, maybe even usually, be correct to make the maximum number of Thralls that you can make because of your various class abilities that are going to use them, there may be situations where you back it down a notch so that you don't clog up an area and your teammates can get to the enemy. Alright, this next section I'm going to call Balance Quick Hits. I'm going to talk about a bunch of things. We got a bunch of bullet points here, but I'm not going to linger on any one thing for too long. This is kind of my et cetera section. Let's start with Dead Weight. I do not believe that this is an acceptable focus spell for the Necromancer class. The Necromancer is this class built around extremely powerful focus spells. And Dead Weight is basically, I'm going to slow you down. I'm going to make you not move. And while in some cases that's fine, I don't think this holds its weight compared to something like Bone Spear. So my character currently has 4th level spell slots. So 1d8 base plus 2d8 scaling 3 times. So I could deal, 7d8 piercing damage to up to 3 creatures in a 15-foot line, or I could do the same thing that this spell was able to do at 1st level. And this never scales up, never gets better. I think this would be a fine thing on other classes, and maybe even good in some contexts, but I don't think Dead Weight is worth 2 actions and a focus point on the Necromancer class. And I think this is particularly problematic because the Flesh Magician is built around Dead Weight. And it's, intentionally supposed to make Dead Weight better by making difficult terrain when you are destroying Thralls. So you want to slow something down, maybe, grab it fully for a second, and then make it harder to get away once you break out. But it's really only grabbed truly on a critical failure, which is going to be relatively rare. You're just immobilizing it. If that creature can still do something meaningful while immobilized, you're not really accomplishing anything with your focus spell. And you're probably not a DM, you're probably not a game master. You don't know all the statistics of the enemies you're fighting, and maybe your DM does some homebrew stuff on top of that. You don't know whether or not that enemy is just going to have a really cool ranged attack that they can do from 30, 40, 60 feet away if you have grabbed that, or sorry, not grabbed, immobilized that enemy. I do not think Dead Weight is pulling its weight. And I wish that the Fleshmonger instead got the Muscle Barrier focus spell instead. I think this one is very strong. Now we're going to do the Muscle Barrier section. Now, this is a 1st level focus spell, but it is currently available via a 2nd level class feat. So this would require a little tweaking. So, you transform a Thrall into layers of thick muscle that wrap around you or an ally. The Thrall is split into pieces and flung towards a willing creature within 15 feet of it, destroying the Thrall and granting that creature 10 temporary hit points. And you get a +1 status bonus to athletic checks until the spell ends. So, this scales heightened +1, temporary hit points increase by 10. So, let's keep using my 8th level character as an example. I believe my 8th level Necromancer has 94 hit points, and I do have the toughness feat scaling that up a little bit, and I think I have +2 con. Reasonable con. I can give my 94 HP Necromancer 40 temporary hit points. Up to 3 times. A 4th time if I consumed a Thrall in process. And that's not just me, this can go to my allies as well. This can go to that fighter who is just in the shit, wailing away with a really big weapon and doing a lot of damage. This can go to that other spellcaster who is nearly down, and then bam, just you get half an HP bar back instantly. I think this is a very, very strong focus spell. This is perhaps going to be one of the premier temporary hit point options in the game. And one of my personal beliefs is that Paizo is currently experimenting with temporary HP. The Razmirin Priest dedication recently was one of the best temporary HP options that we had ever seen. And I think Muscle Barrier is going to be up there right along with that in terms of some of the best things to do with temporary HP. Like, this is a lot. This is a lot of temporary HP. A lot of times on class features, we'll get like temporary HP equal to half your level, or temporary HP equal to your level. And this is more than that. This is a lot more than that. I think this is a very good focus spell. I think this is very good design space to be exploring, because this is, you saying, I am going to do less damage. I am not using this focus point to control. I am not using this focus point to damage. I am using this to prolong the fight, and assuming that, our resources are fine and that we're doing okay, that like we will get through this encounter. This is kind of like giving an occult caster access to the heal spell. The math doesn't quite work out that way, but that's kind of the same degree of impact that is happening here. And this is just something you can do every combat throughout the day, up to 4 times. This is really strong, and I think more people should be talking about Muscle Barrier right now. I would not be surprised if the numbers on these changed ever so slightly by the time that we get to full release, or if we got a couple more words on this that said a creature is then immune to Muscle Barrier for 1 minute, so that you can't keep just spamming Muscle Barrier on the same creature. But then at the same time, like, if you're supposed to be this Gish Necromancer, shouldn't you be able to spam Muscle Barrier on yourself so you can stand on the front lines? So, like, there's definitely some design tension there. Next up is Reclaim Power. So this is a 6th level feat. It requires that you have Consume Thrall, which you do. You're a Necromancer, but just when we start thinking about Necromancer dedications much, much later down the line, just, wording might be chosen for that reason. So I'm just going to read this one. You use your Thralls to restore yourself. You consume a Thrall, increasing the range to 30 feet. And note, consume a Thrall. Consuming a Thrall is what gives you your focus point back. And you regain 10 hit points. You can destroy up to 4 more of your Thralls in range to increase the healing by 10 per Thrall. If you destroy 5 Thralls total, you can also decrease a bunch of status conditions by 1. This feels very awkward to me. So this is essentially a once per combat thing, which is fine, because this is an ability. This is not a focus spell. This is not a spell slot or anything like that. So this is totally fine as an ability. But the fact that this doesn't scale at all feels really weird to me. So at 6th level, you could consume a total of 5 Thralls to heal for 50 hit points. That is awesome. At that level, that is insane. Or excuse me, I think I said the wrong level. So this is feat 6, meaning 12th level. So at 12th level, you could have something that heals a very... No, fuck. Sorry, feat 6. No, feat 6, not focus spell 6. So you have something that at that level is very, very respectable healing. But this never then scales up. So it might be a way to top yourself off if you have a whole bunch of Thralls that aren't around, that are around that you're not using for any reason. So like very late game, for example, your create thrall could be making 4 at a time, and it could be very easy to reclaim power and just get that free healing boost. But that 50 HP means something very different at 6th level versus 20th level. And I think the scaling on this one just is it's not there. I think this feat needs some fine tuning. All right, my next complaint is a timing complaint. I think Life Sense is one of the most interesting feats that I've ever seen in all of Pathfinder Second Edition. So you gain Impresense Life Sense with a range of 30 feet, allowing you to also know the current hit points and temporary hit points of any living or undead creature you can see within 30 feet. That's the peek behind the GM screen. That's you knowing instantly how strong every enemy within range of you is. Have you ever started an encounter, thought you knew which thing was the boss, and then been wrong? Because I've done that plenty of times. I have absolutely misidentified which enemy was the strong enemy. That doesn't happen anymore. Have you ever had Force Barrage and gone, how many darts do I need to send at that enemy to kill that enemy? You don't really need to guess anymore. You just know. This is such a unique and cool and potentially Necromancer defining ability. And it's competing against quickened casting. Anything that gives you free actions, anything that lets you cheat on action economy is incredibly powerful. And I wish this competition at 10th level was not there. I understand not wanting to make this a low level ability, but I really wish that this was something that higher level necromancers just got and you didn't have to compete with quicken casting for it. So I'm currently at level 8, and I don't know what I'm doing when I get to level 10, because the necromancer has some action economy trouble. If you are thinking about like free archetypes for a necromancer, let me tell you, a Beastmaster or similar dedication that is going to give you an animal companion for a free move action every turn, it's going to be really hard to compete with that. And so not taking things like quicken casting when you can feels rough to me, especially since you probably aren't going to just take it the next level, because at 12th level you get the sort of follow-up to your initial Grim Fascination feat. So it's kind of like you make your choice here for which one of these you're getting, and then you don't really have a good opportunity to take it again later. All right, next quick hit. Initiative. So I think for any spellcaster, having a high initiative count is really important, because you get to throw down your battlefield control spells before everybody moves and situations change. So the earlier you go in a combat, the more of an opportunity you have to just do a big flashy thing and swing the encounter incredibly in your direction. And it seems to me that necromancers in particular, as this class that is trying to control and manipulate the battlefield, their initiative is more important than for most other spellcasters. And I want to use Flesh Tsunami as an example of that. So this is an 8th level focus spell. So you destroy a thrall, you make a 60-foot cone, which becomes greater difficult terrain. You can then liquefy a second thrall when you do that to make its limbs grasp your foes to make them do a fortitude saving throw. And they can get penalties to their speeds, big penalties to their speeds, or even become immobilized beyond that. If you go first in a battle, and the enemy is a decent amount of distance away from you, Flesh Tsunami is insane. Just absolutely insane. There's such a huge cost to moving. Like, your enemy is probably going to waste all 3 of their actions trying to get to you. Maybe not even get to you. This is a 60-foot cone. And if you have something like, I don't know, a Flurry Ranger in your party or a couple other spellcasters in your party, like you can buff or take some shots at enemies before they even get to you. And then imagine how the fight looks if you have a middling initiative roll. Are you even casting this if you're going fourth in initiative? The fight has probably changed enough that this is not viable to cast anymore. This is what, your 16th level feat? If your 16th level feat is invalidated by you not going first, that's not great, right? So, I wonder if the Necromancer should have a feat that increases their initiative greatly. And the comparison I had in mind here is to the Animist's, I believe it is called Medium's Awareness, which initially starts out giving you a +2 bonus to initiative, but then later on it becomes up to a +4 initiative bonus. And I wonder if the Necromancer should have a similar feat somewhere along the lines, or if their perception should go above. I think it currently caps out at expert. Sort of on that note, I think every single Necromancer should probably have something that boosts their initiative, be that an item, the incredible initiative feat, something like that. It just feels very, very important to me. And to cap off this section, I would like to go back to create Thrall for just a minute. So I think this is a really cool designed cantrip. I like it a lot. However, I think it only meets the Thrall production needs of many Necromancers when you hit level 7th and get Expert Necromancy. I think past level 7, this cantrip slaps and is totally fine for doing what you need to do. However, I think prior to level 7, many Necromancers are going to find themselves absolutely Thrall starved, especially in fights that do not have many enemies, so that your inevitable return action is not necessarily online yet. And I wish there was something else that created Thralls beyond just this action at lower levels. I am not sure exactly what this looks like in terms of balance. I have seen some people suggest that Create Thrall can be a free action, which I do not think is viable with Create Thrall being as strong as it is. I think there is room to give the Necromancers a feat or a class feature or something like that that kind of helps to alleviate this. I don't think it would be crazy, although I think it would be very good. I don't think it would be crazy to start out Create Thrall, making 2 Thralls, and then to just give the scale up to 3 at Master Necromancy. That would make Necromancers a lot stronger at the early levels, because at early levels you will get things like Create Thrall with flanking, make that attack, and then cast a cantrip. Like, that just becomes a very, very strong pattern at level 1, maybe too strong. So I'm going to leave that one to game designers to figure out. But I think there is a deficit in early level Thrall production that maybe needs to be addressed. And I think those are all my quick hits. All right, as we wrap up this video, I just want to say a couple more things. As a reminder, I am not a game designer, and you probably aren't either. The people at Paizo are awesome, and they have made a really well-designed class here that I think needs a little bit of polish, a little bit of working on some numbers, some minor adjustment here or there. But generally speaking, again, I want to reiterate, I love the Necromancer class so much that I stopped playing my current character in my main campaign to test one out immediately. And after playing a few sessions with my Necromancer, I am very happy with that decision. So again, I really like the Necromancer. I have said a lot of negative things today, but it is coming from a place of love and from a place of I am enjoying the hell out of this class. And on that note, the other thing that I want to reiterate in my conclusion here is that the Necromancer design is really good. So many of the focus spells that the Necromancer has access to are incredibly flavorful, incredibly interesting, and give us a new spellcasting class that plays out quite differently from existing spell casting classes. And given how many different spellcasters we have now that are all drawing upon the same four spellcasting traditions, I think that is a massive win. As a final reminder, if you are playing a Necromancer and you have thoughts on it after doing your playtesting, please submit those to Paizo. Get your voice heard. Give them good feedback so that we can look forward to an awesome finalized version of this class in another year or two when everything fully goes through their process. And again, good feedback is meaningful and constructive. If you run around saying, oh, stupid Paizo doesn't know how to balance their game, what were the designers thinking when they were doing this? You are not doing anyone any favors. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. See ya.